friends, thanks for joining me today. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. This is going to be a kind of double whammy wrap up of the books that I read in January and February of this year. It's been a busy year so far. A lot of my time has been taking, my free time has been taken up in the initial planning stages of my upcoming wedding this year. So I just haven't really had time to film. Still managed to read a lot, so let's just go ahead and get into it. So starting with January reads, we have Wicked Saints by Emily A. Duncan. This is the first in a series following a cleric named Nadia who has the ability to pray to the gods to lend them her power, and her country is at war with another country that refuses to bow to the gods, and instead they use blood magic for power and basically like bypass the gods. And she goes on a mission to end the war and has to partner with a guy who uses blood magic. This was a 2 out of 5, and it's one of those books that are kind of rare for me, that I was just so bored during most of it. I did go audiobook for this, and actually thank goodness, because I could just basically put it on and like read it while only half paying attention, and like I didn't care about anything happening, even though there were like plenty of action scenes, which I normally really enjoy in books. I didn't care about the cringy romance. The plot and, you know, the world building just kind of felt all over the place and random. The idea of the magical, you know, theological war is kind of the only thing I liked about it. It was interesting, but also apparently the author is like a racist bully. So yeah, not continuing the series. Glad that I can, you know, unhaul this physical copy and make room for other books. The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. This is the third book in the Folk of the Air YA fantasy trilogy. It's about a mortal girl from our world named Jude, whose parents are murdered by one of the Fae, and she and her sisters are taken away from our world to be raised in the Fae world of Elfheim. And you follow Jude as she has to survive in society that is just hostile to mortals, and also while she works in the shadows against plots for the throne. And this was a 4.5 star. I love Holly Black's Fae. They're bargaining tricksters of nature and just fun magic. The super slow burn enemies to lovers romance finally culminates in this book. Jude is a great realistic heroine, and I don't know, there's something that happens at about 70% into this book that, like, I don't know, it just had me like gawking. It was just really cool and intense. I like how things ended with some things that definitely feel like they could be expanded on, and I believe they are, with there's a duology that takes place in the same world focused on some of the side characters that are in this series. So yeah, I can't wait to read that, and I just really enjoyed the series. The Fisherman by John Langan. This is a contemporary cosmic horror following these two widowers who find camaraderie together in their shared passion for fishing in the wake of their losses, and they're eventually drawn into this like uneasy story being told of the origins of a fishing spot called Dutchman's Creek and something called the Fisherman. And it's a story of grief, of desperation, and, you know, thalassic eldritch horrors. And this was 4 stars. It starts out pretty sad. It paints just a very evocative portrait of loss. Langan's writing is very descriptive in general, and it is mundane for a fair chunk of it at the start, but I was very entertained by how much creepy supernatural stuff goes on like in the latter half, and you do have to wait patiently for it, but you know, it delivers on that front, and there are definitely just disturbing vibes through this. And there is a story within a story situation that's a significant portion of this book, and I was a little frustrated when that kicked in because it was, you know, like back to square one with this mundane setup again, right as we're like kind of about to get answers or kind of promised answers. But overall, I did enjoy this. Very creepy, and the ending was just like delightfully disturbing. Scythe by Neal Shusterman. This is the first book in the Arc of a Scythe dystopian sci-fi trilogy, and it takes place in a future where humanity has eliminated death and disease, and the only way to die now is to be randomly selected to be killed, and they call it gleaning. By people who are called scythes. And you're following these two teenagers who are chosen to potentially become a scythe apprentice, and you're following them as they learn the trade and have to work through just the morality of it all, and things get complicated when they're told that the one who is chosen to be a scythe has to glean the one who isn't. This was 4.5 stars. It was just like, I don't know, mind-boggling. Like just the morality of all of this, the corruption, that exists in this system somehow. The world building was amazing. Like, I just ate all of that shit up. Like, so interesting, all these little tidbits that you get. There's this benevolent AI called the Thunderhead that basically runs the world and knows everything, and it doesn't show up very much in this book, but the next book is called Thunderhead, and I'm actually reading that right now on Kindle, so I'm just kind of stoked to learn more about it and see more of it. And this book just really gets the thoughts flowing about life and death and how we view it, morality, mortality, and just what living in this kind of world would be like, where you can't die. I really enjoyed it, even though there isn't a whole lot of action in this. You're basically watching these characters' internal monologues learn and battle with their own sense of what's right and wrong and just. And there are twists and some mysteries that just really made it a page turner. This was just a really easy book to read. It was really engaging, really enjoyed it, and looking forward to continuing to read the second book. Down Comes the Night by Allison Saft. This is a fantasy romance about a girl named Wren who is I think kind of a combat healer of sorts, and she has the opportunity to make up for this mistake that she makes at the beginning by going to this nobleman's estate to heal his servant. But the servant turns out to be a guy named Hal, who is a sworn enemy of her country, and they have to work together to solve a mystery to stop their countries from going to war. This was 4 stars. The writing was descriptive and honestly pretty solid for a debut novel. The romance was cute, a little bit insta-love, but it was still cute. And I think that having a couple point of view chapters from Hal would have helped him feel more fleshed out to me, but this book is all about the struggle, between forgiveness and mercy versus justice and duty, and just the destructiveness of hatred. And Wren is told by everyone around her that she's just overly emotional, and she struggles with that throughout, being emotional, which I understand and can relate to. I enjoyed this. I like Saft's writing, and I would read more by her. Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. This is the second book in the Wayward Children Portal Fantasy series, which follows people who went through portals into other worlds as children and have, for one reason or another, come back to our world. And this one takes place before book 1 and follows these 2 girls, Jack and Jill, who appear in the first book. They're siblings. And this is the story of their very kind of strict upbringing and how they find a doorway to a dangerous world called the Moors. And this was 5 stars. I thought that this was more engaging than book 1. I liked it better than book 1. All of the books in this series are short. They're 200 pages or less. The parents are just total self-absorbed assholes, so it was kind of fun to hate them and just shake my head in just disbelief at their thought processes. And Jack and Jill are complex, and you see them, transform and sort of swap roles in a way, but it's more complicated than that. I don't know, the character work is very compelling in this. And the Moors feel very spooky and are inhabited by classic horror elements like vampires and a mad scientist. And and I just devoured this one, and I enjoyed it in a way that I didn't with the first book. I hope that I enjoy the future books the way that I did this one. At this point, I have read enough Seanan McGuire now that I think I generally don't vibe with her writing, but there are a couple books of hers that I have rated highly and liked. So I'm hoping that more of these will be among those. Crown of Feathers by Nicki Preto. This is the first book in a YA fantasy series about a girl named Veronica who dreams of becoming a phoenix rider and fighting against the current empire. And she ends up running away from her controlling sister and disguising herself as a boy in order to join this rebel order of secret phoenix riders, hoping to be able to bond with a phoenix. And there's magic in this world. She's what is called an animage, who are people who have like a magical affinity for animals. And she also has something more rare called shadow magic that she has to keep hidden. There are multiple POVs. There's hers, another boy from the Riders who she starts to get feelings for but who doesn't know she's a girl, and a boy named Sev who's hiding the fact that he's an animage while being a soldier for the Empire who would enslave him if they knew the truth. And this was a 3.5 star. I think the pacing here was a bit slow. It starts off with a very emotional and compelling event involving Veronica's sister that drives her to leave on her quest. But as the story goes, it starts to just kind of drag, and there are these just very stark moments of just info dumping that really just kind of pull the pacing down, and it's unclear if it really adds anything to the story, in my opinion. And I also didn't care really much about the point of view of Sev. I would literally forget that he existed each time we switched away from him. This has a lot of, classic YA fantasy tropes. I think that I am finally reaching a point in my reading where I'm a little less interested in reading just, any YA fantasy book of this caliber, even though it was still fun, and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just not really looking for this kind of thing at the moment. The phoenixes were very cool. It's usually dragons that I read about when it comes to magical creatures. However, the older sister is insufferable. There's a reason for it. She was just infuriating. She was a cruel person. I just hated her. And I don't know, I guess, it could be a credit to the author for creating such a hateful and controlling character, but I don't know, honestly, I'm so mad at the character that she's a big reason, part of the reason why I don't think I want to continue the series. I don't care what her motivations are. But I mean, this was still a good solid YA fantasy. The pacing was just kind of slow, and I was just never super invested. Okay, so now for the books that I read in February, starting with A Marvellous Light by Freya Marske. This is a historical fantasy that takes place in an alternate Edwardian England where magical society exists in secret, and a man named Robin finds himself mistakenly assigned as a government liaison between regular and magical society after his predecessor goes missing, and he has to work with magical society's liaison named Edwin to solve the mystery of his predecessor's disappearance and to try and remove a curse that's put on him by these attackers who think that he knows something that he doesn't. And there's also, they discover a plot that threatens all of the magicians of Britain. And of course, they also start to catch feelings for each other. This was a 3.75 star. I don't know exactly what it is, but the very start of this book, after the first chapter, which is kind of feels like a prologue, I just felt, I don't know, very abruptly dropped into the story in a way that left me a little bit confused and off kilter. I just never felt settled into the world, even by the end of the book. And I don't know, I frequently just kind of felt like the plot didn't know where it was supposed to be going. But Edwin and Robin have a fantastic angsty gay romance. There are a few sex scenes that were some of the best I've ever read. They weren't cringy at all, just very, hot and heavy. The murder mystery plot was fine. I think, again, the plot was just a little messy overall. I still enjoyed this, though. The magic is based on Cat's Cradle hand movements, if you've ever played Cat's Cradle, which uses string. And Edwin's magic is very weak, and he needs to use an actual string to help guide his movements, where most magicians are just able to, you know, cradle without string. So it's kind of seen as a weakness on his part. So, like, I don't know if I'm going to continue the series. There are 2 more books following other characters, but I wouldn't hesitate to, you know, recommend this to someone who wants a gay historical fantasy romance. Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mahurin. This is a YA fantasy that takes place in a French-inspired world where witches are persecuted and hunted by the church. And the main character, Lou, who is a witch, has to marry one of these witch hunters named Reed, but he doesn't know she's a witch. So this is mostly about Lou trying to prevent him from learning her secret. It's an enemies to lovers sort of thing, and she's also trying to hide/run from something else that is a threat to her life. And the cover of this is absolutely gorgeous. I love it. This is the first in a trilogy, and this was a solid 3.5 star. I enjoyed it, very in line with, you know, the YA romantasy genre and tropes, like at least for this era. This came out in 2019. I think that if you enjoy Sarah J. Maas's writing and vibes, there's a good chance that you'll enjoy this as well. I wish there had been more displays of witchcraft, but you know, there's a lot of having to hide magic as part of the plot. Lou wasn't my favorite heroine, but I just personally don't like overly snarky characters, snarky and cocky main characters, which she was, in my opinion. She and Reed are, you know, fine. There are, I think, a couple short spicy scenes that were also fine. I really enjoyed all of the setup in this book at the start, and I really do enjoy like kind of the feeling and vibes of the setting, probably the most, but it went just kind of downhill in interest a bit for me after the forced marriage happens, and then, you know, it does perk up back up near the end. But it ends really abruptly on this weird little like line of dialogue that means nothing to the reader at that point. So I don't know, not the greatest cliffhanger ending. So while I do recommend this if you're looking for a romantasy with witches, I don't have any immediate plans to continue the series, like no hard feelings or anything. I just have too many other things on my TBR I'd rather read right now. The Date from Hell by Gwenda Bond. This is the second book in a contemporary paranormal rom-com duology, and it's about a girl named Callie who works for her family's escape room business. And in the first book, she has to work with the Prince of Hell named Luke to stop the apocalypse from happening. And it's funny and cute and very tame in the romance department. This second book follows them as an established couple, and they're trying to make some administrative changes to hell, and before Lucifer will even consider it, he tasks them with redeeming an apparently irredeemable soul, and they end up on a sort of wild goose chase for the Holy Grail. This was a 3-star. I liked the first book more. I gave book 1 4 stars, but this was still charming and enjoyable. These are extremely light on the romance, and it's pretty innocent for the most part. There is one short and sweet explicit scene in this book, but I would say if you're looking for, you know, a romance with plenty of spice and angst, or even like a moderate amount, this won't do it for you. It's all very light. I actually do wish that their relationship had been just a bit more than it was, and this is more like an adventure comedy with like sprinkles of romance. But I think the characters are great. Everyone is funny, you know, and a little cheeky. It dilly-dallies a bit in the middle, but I still liked it, and I just, you know, enjoy the fun concept of these books. And the final thing that I read in February was a doozy, and that was Perdido Street Station by China Mieville. This is a steampunk urban fantasy sci-fi that takes place in a grimy city called New Crobzon, which is honestly a character in its, in its own right. And you're following a few characters who get into kind of various troubles, and eventually this horrifying thing is unleashed upon the city, and they have to kind of work together to try and stop it. This was a 4 out of 5 star. This is one of just the most like unique and distinctive and crazy, I don't know, fantasy books I've read. My main criticism is that the author spends a lot of time on details of his setting that at times just feels like a bit much, and it slows things down. And this dude uses the most crazy huge words that I've read in a fiction book. Like, thank goodness I read this on Kindle so I could just like highlight words to bring up their definition. It was very helpful. And like, I don't know, if he actually just knew all those words with literally without using a thesaurus, then I'm genuinely impressed. Like, I don't know, I think I have a decent vocabulary, but I don't know, this was like a whole other level. But aside from those things, there are so many cool races and magics and technology and just like concepts throughout the whole book. You're constantly discovering more and more really cool world building things that I just like ate up. It wasn't a happy or uplifting read. I'll warn you, this is like a dark fantasy. The thing that is unleashed is like so freaky and cool. There are just so many cool things in this book. It's kind of hard to encompass it all here, but this is part of a series that takes place in the same world of Boss Lag, but I think each book follows like different characters. I think you can read them out of order if you want. It's not a continuous story. I'd recommend this if you want something different than your typical adult fantasy that is dark, gritty, steampunk with a bit of, eldritch horror just sprinkled in. So that is it for the things that I read in January and February. I feel like I forgot that I read quite so much because, again, a lot of my free time has actually been taking up trying to plan my wedding and get all these vendors taken care of, but I still managed to finish a lot. Right now, I have finally started reading Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. So finally getting on that, and that's gonna be, who knows how long that's gonna take me with all the other stuff I have going on. It's like 1,200 or 1,300 pages. So that's a chunky one. I started reading Thunderhead, the second book in the arc of a Scythe. And what else I'm reading the third and final book as audiobook of the Miss Percy's, I can't remember exactly what this series is called, but it's a book. It's like a kind of like a natural history of dragons, or I think like Emily Wilde's. It's a kind of historical fantasy about this woman who discovers a dragon egg and is kind of just all about the mishaps and adventures that she has trying to like deal with this baby dragon when she's like just this random person. And it's very cute and fun. It's the third and final book in that series. So yeah, those are the things I'm reading. I'm very excited that spring it's on the way. I can feel it. The weather's finally getting kind of warmer. I finally started, I was able to go for a run outside. I don't like running on the treadmill at the gym, but when it's too cold or too warm, I have to. So now that it's getting a little bit warmer outside, I'm finally able to run outside and listen to my audiobook. So yeah, those are all the things that are going on in my reading journey. Let me know what you guys are reading, or if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!